Welcome back to our YouTube channel. During this video, we'd like to give a preview for March Madness 2016. As always, feel free to follow us at jwent815 for all of our picks and analysis throughout the rest of the season. Our bracket preview this year is going to be broken down region by region. We're going to go through each of these regions, going to give you our favorites, who we like, who we don't like, maybe a couple of upsets. Again, giving you a high-level bracket preview for this year's March Madness. All of our picks, as always, will be at Picking Duck. You can go out there. Feel free to follow us on Twitter to make sure you get all of our picks. We will be giving picks for every single one of these games. You are able to go out and get access to that. We are going to pick every single game this year during the tournament. The goal of this video is just to give you a preview, who we like, who we don't like, and give you some analysis of each of the regions.
So the first region that we're going to start with is the South region. KU coming in as the overall #1 seed. They got, a decent draw. It's not excellent, but it definitely could be worse. You'll hear many analysts talk about this being the toughest region. I don't know that I could make an argument for that necessarily. One point that would help that argument is the fact that you see Arizona as a 6th seed. So if you've got 5 other teams that are better than Arizona, obviously you did get put in a pretty strong region. But seeding can be a little back and forth on what makes sense and what doesn't. So with that, I'm going to break down what we see in this region, and we'll go from there. So for starters, you got KU as the 1 seed. They have a pretty easy road to get to the Final Four. Probably the toughest game that I see, honestly, is going to be their second round matchup. I like UConn to come out of there, and they're honestly the hottest team in basketball right now, winning their conference tournament and the way that they did it. They're playing with a lot of swagger right now and could really put up a pretty big fight against the overall #1 ranked Jayhawks. Other than that, I see Nova making a pretty good run and probably getting to the Elite Eight with the road that they got put in. They're going to see an Iowa or Temple the second round, and the toughest team that they're probably going to face in the getting to the Elite Eight would be Miami. So although I wasn't really a favorite of Villanova coming into this, the road that they have in front of them makes me think that they're probably going to be able to make the Elite Eight. So with that said, we're going to head to the next region.
The next region that we'd like to look at is in the West. Oregon is the #1 seed in this region, opens up pretty close to home in Spokane, Washington. They should be able to win 2 games there and move on to the Sweet 16. Moving on, the 4-5 area in Providence, Duke as a 4 seed, Baylor as a 5 seed. Look out here for Yale. Yale is a team that we think could give Baylor all kinds of trouble. Baylor traditionally has not had a lot of success during the tournament. We look for Yale to put up a pretty good fight there. Duke should be able to make the Sweet 16 relatively easily to set up a showdown with Oregon. Moving on to the Oklahoma City part of this bracket, Oklahoma as the 2 seed should have no problem coming out of there as well. Look at VCU against Oregon State. And we think Oregon State is a little bit overseeded. They come in as a 7 seed, really struggled throughout the season in the Pac-12. Granted, the Pac-12 is one of the stronger conferences, but we think a 7 seed is very, very strong and a little bit overseeded for Oregon State. Look for VCU to put up a pretty good fight in that matchup and potentially set up a matchup with Buddy Hield and the Sooners in round 2. The other matchups in Oklahoma City, looking forward to try to get the old Texas A&M rivalry back renewed for at least a game in the basketball season. However, Texas has a pretty tough matchup in the first round with Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa, traditionally a pretty strong team throughout the season, very well coached, a lot of talent, should give Shaka Smart and the Longhorns plenty of trouble. Texas A&M as a 3 seed, not the strongest 3 seed that we've seen. Green Bay should be able to keep this game pretty close, but we think Texas A&M should still be able to get the job done and set up a matchup with either Northern Iowa or Texas. Looking at this bracket, Oregon's probably one of the weaker 1 seeds that we've seen. Looking back at past tournaments, even at this tournament, Oregon as a 1 seed, they might make it, but we think that they're going to struggle. We think that they're a little bit overseeded. We also look for teams like Duke, teams like Oklahoma to have maybe a little bit better chance to come out of this region, not only at the Elite Eight, but also to make it to the Final Four in Houston.
The next region that we're going to be reviewing is the East region. North Carolina's coming in as the 1 seed. They're going to be getting a couple of home court games to start this tournament. They're going to be going against Florida Gulf Coast and then looking to play either USC or Providence. Providence, we think, got a little disrespected coming into this tournament as a 9 seed. They had a pretty good season in the Big East, and we like them to take on North Carolina in that second round and really give North Carolina a fight. So be looking for that matchup. Further down the bracket, you see Indiana and Kentucky. I don't see any upsets happening there. We love Kentucky's chances to get to the Final Four and open some eyes. They're playing really good ball right now. Further down, you've got West Virginia, Notre Dame. Tougher matchups for those two, honestly. Stephen F. Austin is a great squad. They put up a great record this year and could honestly give the Mountaineers fits if they can break that press. Then you've got the 2 seed Xavier. Xavier honestly has got a pretty easy road if they can play some solid basketball to get to the Elite Eight. They'd be looking at a Wisconsin or a Pittsburgh team. Wisconsin's been struggling this year despite their tournament experience. I would like Xavier to take that matchup. And then they would see either West Virginia, Notre Dame, or Michigan, Tulsa, or Stephen F. Austin. All very beatable teams in our opinion. So we like Xavier to make it to the Elite Eight, likely either playing North Carolina or Kentucky. So that's what we see coming out of this East region, and now we'll wrap it up with the last one.
The last region that we'd like to break down is the Midwest. The Midwest, looking at the top, has Virginia as the number 1 seed. Should have no problem. And then you look at the Texas Tech-Butler matchup. A pretty difficult matchup to pick. Texas Tech, a little bit up and down in the Big 12 this year. Butler, traditionally, very well coached, very competitive program. We think that should be a pretty interesting 8-9 matchup. That being said, Virginia should still have a smooth path to make it to the Sweet 16. The next matchups are out in Denver, Colorado. Iowa State against Iona. Very interesting matchup. Should be a lot of points in this one. We think Iowa State should still get the job done, but Iona should be able to keep it close. Another interesting matchup is Purdue against the University of Arkansas Little Rock. Arkansas Little Rock had a very good season, mid-major, not a lot of resources there in Little Rock, but they should be able to play a very competitive game against Purdue, potentially even scoring an upset. That being said, we think Iowa State should set up a pretty good matchup against Virginia in the Sweet 16. Moving down in this region, again, games in Denver, Gonzaga, and then Utah against Fresno State. We think that the Utah-Fresno State game should be competitive. Utah, probably a little bit overseeded. The Pac-12 in general, we think very, very, very strong conference this year, but we think that they got a little bit too much respect throughout the seeding process. We think that Seton Hall Gonzaga, the winner of that game, could potentially knock off either Utah if they don't get beat by Fresno State in the first round. So look for some interesting games there in Denver, Colorado. And finally, the last part of this region in the early rounds is in St. Louis. Michigan State is a 2 seed. Should have no problem with Middle Tennessee State. But then looking at a Dayton-Syracuse matchup. Syracuse is a team, a little bit of controversy with them being in as a 10 seed. That being said, you have Jim Boeheim as a head coach, plenty of talent and tradition there at Syracuse. We think that they should be able to beat Dayton in the first round and set up a little bit of a traditional matchup against Michigan State. Michigan State, that being said, does have a pretty easy road to make it to the Sweet 16 in Chicago, and looking forward to a matchup potentially with a Virginia, with an Iowa State. We really like Michigan State to come out of this region and represent the Midwest in the Final Four.
To wrap things up, this year has been an interesting year for college basketball. You've seen the team that's been ranked number 1 lose so many times. It's been tough to determine who is the actual number 1 team in the nation. And after these games go down, we're going to have the number 1 team. The powerhouses have risen to the top. You still see traditional number 1 seeds, Kansas, North Carolina. Oregon snuck in there, but it'll be interesting to see if they can handle the pressure of playing as a number 1 seed. The best thing that you can do is find that Cinderella team that's going to make that run to the Elite Eight or possibly the Final Four and get yourself ahead of your office bracket pool and make a little bit of cash on the side. Feel free to tweet out at us with any questions you might have. We're happy to offer any advice. And always go out to Picking Duck, check out our picks, and we will be making picks for every single game of this March Madness tournament. So count on us for that. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.